اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah Ta'ala accept your deeds and your fast during this holy month and grant you and I more tawfiq to worship Him and perform the best of deeds, inshallah Ta'ala. Yesterday we were speaking about a story in Al-Quran Al-Kareem that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala repeats in multiple parts of the Holy Book. And that is the story of Adam alayhi salam, the angels alayhimus salam, and the devil, may Allah curse him. When Allah Azza wa Jal commanded the angels salamullahi alayhim to prostrate for Adam after Adam was created. And we said that the story mentions that all of the angels alayhimus salam prostrated for Adam, all of them obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except for one individual who was amongst the angels but was not from them. He was a jinn. Verse 50 of Surah Al-Kahf explicitly mentions this, as it says, كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ, he was from the jinns. And this individual is Iblis, the devil, may Allah curse him. We said that when reading or hearing the story, one of the first lessons that come to mind is the lesson regarding arrogance, that a person should not be arrogant, because arrogance can lead you to your doom. Similar to how Iblis, la'anahullah, lost his status. He would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He worshipped Him for at least 6,000 years, as Imam Ali alayhi salam states. But he lost those worships, he lost his status when he lived an hour of arrogance. However, we also mentioned that there's another lesson we can derive from that story, and that is the lesson regarding submission. Because we find that the angels alayhimus salam who prostrated for Adam, all of them prostrated for Adam, the angels alayhimus salam, their status was preserved. They did not lose their status. Why? Because they obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or say they submitted to Allah's command. Whereas when Shaitan, when Iblis la'anahullah rebelled and refused to submit, what happened to him? He became the devil. So he dropped from the level of an angel and turned into a shaitan, the devil. May Allah curse him and keep him away from us. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches me and you to submit. Implicitly Allah is telling us that if we behave like a shaitan, if we rebel and we refuse to listen to Allah's commands, to obey Allah's commands, then we will be doomed as well. Submission, my brothers and sisters, is a very important trait. In fact, it is the core of our religion, the core of Islam. There is a sermon that the commander of the faithful alayhi salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi delivered after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. It is called the Sermon of Al-Wasila. In it, Imam Ali alayhi salam summarized Islam with one word: Islam. This complex detailed and deep religion was summarized by alayhi salawatullah alayh in one word. He said, Al-Islamu huwa at-taslim. Islam is submission. And indeed, if you look at the segments of Islam, starting with beliefs, going to practices, and ending with morals, you find that every segment of Islam is connected to submission, connected to submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I believe in the truth and disbelieve in falsehood, I'm submitting to Allah through my beliefs. When I believe that what Allah made lawful is lawful, and what He made unlawful is unlawful, I'm submitting to Allah in beliefs as well. But what type of beliefs? In beliefs pertaining to the unlawfulness and lawfulness of deeds, or say al-halal wal-haram. When I submit on a practical level, I pray, I fast the month of Ramadan, I respect my parents, I treat my siblings with care, so on and so forth. I avoid backbiting, listening to music, dancing, etc. I'm submitting to Allah in what? In practices, in a'mal. And when I beautify my soul with beautiful traits, with good morals, and I purify myself from bad conduct, bad behavior, bad habits, or say evil traits, I'm also submitting to Allah in morals, in akhlaq. So every part of Islam is connected to submission. The more submission we have, the closer we will be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the closer we'll be to perfection, meaning the closer we'll be to actually becoming perfect human beings. So submission is a key trait. It is a fundamental trait. One might say, however, why should I submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Aside from the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is God, and He possesses authority over us, and aside from the fact that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu showers us with blessings, which means that we should obey Him, because obeying Allah is a form of shukr, is a form of what? Thanking God subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aside from these 2 points, can you present, approve, confirming that we need to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the answer is yes, indeed. Aside from these 2 points, if we simply look at the traits of Allah, in fact, we simply look at 3 traits: knowledge, wisdom, and mercy, we'll understand why we must submit to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Let's start with knowledge. Allah's knowledge is limited or unlimited? Unlimited, right? Quran says, Inna Allaha bikulli shay'in alim. Surely Allah is aware of all things. He knows all things, all matters. His knowledge has no limits. Whereas my knowledge, your knowledge, the knowledge of mankind is limited. Take the example of a scholar, of an erudite, someone who specializes in a particular religious or academic field. That scholar will know, say, tens of thousands of pieces of knowledge. But at the same time, that scholar or erudite will be ignorant of hundreds of thousands of pieces of knowledge pertaining to his field or other fields, pertaining to the field in which he specializes or other fields of knowledge, because knowledge is very vast. So as much knowledge as we might have, at the end of the day, we're very ignorant. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses no ignorance. Inna Allaha bikulli shay'in alim. His knowledge is absolute. It has no limits. He knows what you can imagine and what you can't imagine. He knows all things. If we understand this point, before going to the other 2 traits that we mentioned, if we understand if we simply understand this point, we'll understand why we need to submit to Allah Jalla Jalaluh. Allah knows what's best for us, yet we do not know what is best for us. Allah knows our surroundings, knows us human beings, knows His creations inside out. How could He not? When He is the creator. He is the creator of what He created. And so that being said, He knows best what leads humans to their benefit and what protects them from harm. He knows best what leads humans to their doom and what protects them from their doom. Thus He must be obeyed. Allah Jalla Jalaluh alludes to this reality in Al-Quran Al-Kareem when He simply says, Wallahu ya'lam wa antum la ta'lamun. Allah knows, yet you, O humans, do not know. So the first trait that we should look at, that we should remember, is the trait of knowledge. But then again, the issue of submission, why we need to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, becomes clear if we look at the other two traits, which are wisdom and mercy. Similar to His knowledge, His wisdom has no limits. As in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal is the all-wise, and everything He does, everything He says, has a wisdom connected to it, has a wisdom behind it. All of the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are wise. Now sometimes Allah Azza wa Jal might perform a particular action that we don't understand, as in we don't know why Allah did it. Allah might create certain beings whilst we don't know why He created those beings, but we know one thing for sure: there is a wise reason behind every action done by Allah, behind the creation of any creature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Whereas my wisdom and your wisdom is limited. Even if we're wise, at the end of the day, our wisdom is very limited. And sometimes we contradict our wisdom. In what sense, you might say? Well, sometimes we misbehave. Sometimes we commit deeds which we're not supposed to commit. So we go against the call of our intellect. We go against the call of wisdom that lies within us. If that's clear, then now we'll understand more why we need to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last but not least, looking at Allah's mercy and understanding that Allah's mercy is beyond imagination. In fact, you can say that His mercy is beyond limits. Understanding that point also makes us understand why we need to submit to God. You might possess mercy. I might possess mercy, but our mercy is limited. It's limited. God's mercy is impeccable, outstanding, beyond imagination, in fact, beyond limits. In the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is willing to show everyone mercy. Even the greatest of sinners, as long as what? As long as showing that person mercy does not contradict wisdom or justice. You see, sometimes showing a person mercy contradicts wisdom or contradicts justice. Hence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not show mercy to that individual. Thus you find that on the Day of Judgment, some people will be punished. Allah mentions this in the Al-Quran Al-Kareem. Some people will be damned by God. They will dwell in eternal damnation. Why doesn't Allah Azza wa Jal bestow mercy upon them? Because they don't deserve it. And because showing such people mercy contradicts wisdom or contradicts justice. But on the other hand, Allah's mercy is beyond imagination. Take the following passage as an example. What passage? A passage found in one of the supplications of Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. He says, as he describes Allah, Ya man yarham من لا يرحمه العباد ويا من يقبل من لا تقبله البلاد. He says, O he who has mercy upon him toward whom the servants show no mercy, and O he who accepts him whom the cities will not accept. Look at these marvelous passages. Imagine the following. Imagine if there was someone who wronged the people of his society and did injustice to them, to the point the whole society began despising that individual. That person wronged them. He did injustice to them. And as a result, the people of that society despised this individual and got to a point where they showed him no mercy and in fact exiled him. The person left. And at a certain point, he felt regret. He felt guilty for what he had done. So he began repenting, asking Allah Ta'ala for forgiveness. And he came back to the people of his city, asking them for forgiveness, only to see that no one is willing to forgive him. Why? Because of what he had done previously, because of his injustice, because of his misbehavior. He got to a point where people were no longer willing to show him any mercy. So he left the city once again. And now this person felt a lot of guilt. He felt a lot of regret. And asked himself, is there anyone who's willing to show me mercy? Is there anyone who's willing to accept me? When everyone in my society is not willing to accept me. The answer lies where? In the passage of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Yes. There is still one being, and there will always be one being who will be willing to accept you, even if you've committed countless sins. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah's mercy is beyond imagination. And as we said, it is beyond limits. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is willing to forgive the biggest sinner. But again, as long as forgiving him or showing him mercy does not contradict wisdom or justice. So once we understand this issue that Allah's mercy is beyond imagination, we'll understand more, we'll have more understanding why we should submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah, my creator, commands me to perform a particular deed, even if I assume that this deed is not good for me, I should submit to Allah because Allah knows best. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful, He would not command me to do something which would lead me to my doom. Yes, sometimes He does command us to do certain deeds that come with an amount of discomfort. Yes. For example, when you fast, you feel hunger, right? No one likes to feel hungry. You feel hunger. You feel thirst. Sometimes you have a headache. Sometimes you feel so tired that you want to sleep. There is an amount of discomfort which comes with fasting. But on the other hand, there are many benefits, spiritual and even physical benefits that come with fasting. Hence Allah Azza wa Jal commands you to fast. So if I remember Allah's knowledge, Allah's wisdom, and Allah's mercy, I'll understand why when Allah directs a command at me, I, the slave of Allah, should submit to God, whether I understand the wisdom behind that command or not. This, my brothers and sisters, is a very important and critical point. See, Islam is a detailed religion which presents what? Which presents a detailed set of laws. We have thousands or hundreds of thousands of laws in Islam. Sometimes we know the wisdom behind a particular law, and in many cases we don't. We don't know why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to perform a particular deed. Let me give you an example that I presented last year, I believe. Take the example of Salat al-Subh, Salat al-Fajr. Salat al-Fajr consists of how many rak'ahs? 2, right? Why does Allah Ta'ala command us to perform 2 rak'ahs when performing Salat al-Fajr? Why not 4? Why not 5? Why not 100? Someone will tell me because we're sleepy at the time of Fajr, right? And Allah Ta'ala wants to make it easier for us. Perhaps Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, yes, He wanted to, make things easier for the human being, and so He commanded him to perform 2 simple rak'ahs at the time of Fajr. But then another question comes to mind. Why didn't He command us to perform only 1 rak'ah? Why 2? Why not 1.5? Why not command us to perform a salat that resembles Salat al-Mayyit, a salat that does not have ruku' or sujood at the time of Fajr? Is there wisdom? Yes, there's a wisdom, but I or you might not know it. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala might reveal that wisdom for us through Al-Quran, through Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. Then again, He might not reveal it for us. Why? To test our submission. Are you willing to do something that I command you to do, even though you don't know why I am commanding you to perform that deed? This is where a Muslim or a human submission is really put to the test. Is really put to the test. Are you willing to do a deed when you know Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala commands you to perform that deed, but you don't know what is the wisdom behind it? That is the test. That is the test of submission. So submission, my brothers and sisters, is very important. It's a key trait. It's a trait that the Muslims needed in the past, and the Muslims need today, and will continue to need until the Day of Judgment. In fact, if we look at the past, we'll see that, unfortunately, what led us to our current state today, us Muslimin, is the lack of submission that existed within the Islamic Ummah. Today, for example, as we're talking right now, there are Muslimin in the Middle East who are starving, who don't have proper food, who are being killed. Children, women, innocent people are being bombed. Right now. What led us here? What led the Muslim Ummah to this state? The answer is lack of submission. If the nation submitted to the Prophet's commands, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and followed Ahlul Bayt salamullahi alayhim after the Prophet, followed Ahlul Bayt salamullahi alayhim, followed Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, if none of the companions, none of the first Muslimin, the Muslimin in the first generation of Muslimin, if none of them backstabbed Imam Ali alayhi salam, today you'd find every human being dwelling in harmony under the banner of Muhammad wa al-Muhammad alayhim as-salatu was-salam. But they did not want to submit. This was a major problem that existed and still exists until today amongst the Muslimin. And our Imams made it clear, salamullah alayhim, to their followers or to the Muslimin. Let me give you one example, and we'll conclude today's lecture with this example, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tomorrow we'll continue with fasting and its effects, bi'idhnillah azza wa jalla. In the era of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, a man entered upon the Imam, and that man was from Khurasan. You can find this story in Bihar al-Anwar, as Allam al-Majlisi cites the book Manaqib al-Abi Talib. The tradition goes back to a man called Ma'mun al-Riqi. He says, I was in the presence of Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, when a man called Sahl ibn al-Hasan al-Khurasani entered upon the Imam. He saluted the Imam with salam, and he sat down. Then he told the Imam, O grandson of Allah's Messenger, You are the household of imama. Imama belongs to you, meaning you are our imams. And you possess mercy, gentleness, and kindness. Why is it that you don't rise to retrieve your right, meaning to retrieve the khilafah, to retrieve the caliphate? Why is it that you don't rise to retrieve your right when you have 100,000 men who are ready to fight for you and to strike your enemy with their swords? The man was telling the Imam alayhi salam that you have a lot of followers. You have at least 100,000 followers who are ready to face calamities with you, to sacrifice themselves for you, to fight your enemies. So rise, reclaim your right, retrieve the right of khilafah. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam told him to sit down, and he supplicated for that man. Then he addressed his maid, telling her, light up the tannoor. The tannoor is basically an old day oven. So, the oven in those times. He told her to light up a tannoor. And so she did. The tradition says a tannoor became hot. It became like hot charcoal. And the upper part of a tannoor became white. Here the Imam alayhi salam told that man who was telling him, rise, you have 100,000 followers who are ready to fight for you. He told him, enter the tannoor. Sit down in a tannoor. The man misunderstood Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He thought the Imam was about to punish him. And so he told the Imam, he told him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, do not torture me with fire. Exempt me from this issue, from this command. May Allah grant you exemption. So the Imam told him, I've exempted you. After this incident, what happened? A man called Harun al-Makki entered upon the Imam. When Harun entered, he had his sandal in his hand. He was carrying his sandal with his index finger. He saluted the Imam, peace be upon you, O grandson of Allah's messenger. On the spot, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam told him, go into the tannoor and sit in it. Please focus on this word. The Imam did not give him an introduction. He didn't tell him, Harun, I have a man from Khurasan here who's telling me that we have 100,000 supporters, who's telling me that they're willing to, support me, sacrifice themselves for me, etc. And I want to show him how much submission you have. No. He didn't he didn't utter any introductions. Rather, he told that man simply, enter the tannoor. Sit inside the tannoor. And so Harun went inside and sat in the tannoor. Why? Because he knew this was a command from my Imam. And I have to obey the Imam, alayhi salam. Whether I understand the wisdom behind the command or not. Khalas, the Imam is telling me to sit in the tannoor, I should do so. He sat there. Meanwhile, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam began speaking with that Khurasani about Khurasan. The tradition says it was as if Imam al-Sadiq was living or used to live in Khurasan, meaning Imam al-Sadiq knew Khurasan inside out. And such are our Imams alayhimus salam. They've been given the knowledge about all global matters. In fact, they've been given the knowledge of all things with Allah's permission subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, after he had a conversation with the Khurasani, he told him, rise, O Khurasani, and go. Look at the tannoor. He went, he looked into the tannoor, only to find Harun al-Makki safe and sound. He was sitting down in the tannoor, and nothing had happened to him. Harun came out and he saluted the Imam alayhi salam and the Khurasani. Basically, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam wanted to show that Khurasani how much submission Harun al-Makki had towards his Imams. And he also wanted to show him that you, O Khurasan, you're the one who's talking, right? You're the one who's bragging about the people of Khurasan, etc. You lack submission. I told you enter the Tanur, you wouldn't enter. Then the Imam had one final question. He told him, is there anyone amongst those 100,000 people who resembles Harun al-Makki? Meaning, is there anyone who has the same amount of submission? He told him no. I swear by Allah, none of them are like him. The Imam confirmed the Khurasani's word. He said, I swear by Allah, none of them are like him. Then the Imam said a scary word, salamullahi alayh. He said, أما إنا في زمان لا نجد فيه خمسة معاضدين لنا. He said, surely we're living in an era, he's talking about his era, salamullahi alayh. We're living in an era in which we do not find 5 people who are willing to support us. 5. Here it seems that the Imam alayhi salam is speaking about a specific type of support. Yes, he might find people who show him some sort of service, but not the kind of service, not the kind of support he would need to retrieve the Khilafah. So he says we don't find 5 people in this era who are willing to support us. Then he said, نحن أعلم بالوقت. We know best when is the right time to rise. The message behind this story, my brothers and sisters, is that we need to work on our submission. And one key trait we need to serve Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjal Allah Ta'ala Faraja, during the ghaiba, during the occultation, and after his reappearance, is submission, submitting to the Imam. Salamullahi alayhi. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll continue with these important topics. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala al-Mustafa Muhammad wa alihi al-Tahirin.